Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about managing game expectations. And let me explain what I mean by that. I've already done a video on discoverability, which is about the difficulty of people finding your game even exists. And all the videos I mentioned, I'll put links in below. This is kind of the opposite of that. I'm talking about once someone finds your game, how do you let them know what kind of game it is they're getting? And just so you know, this isn't the expectations that your team would have. So I already talked about maintaining a good vision for your game in my videos on how to be a good game director and how to write good design pillars. I'm not talking about that. I'm specifically talking about once someone learns about your game. So you've managed to make a game and your team is on board and it's about to come out and they've discovered your game. How do you manage their expectations of what kind of game they're going to get? Because sometimes there's such a disparity between what they think they're getting and what they get that they're upset about that. And then they take it out on their review of the game. You have a game that's a pretty decent game, but because they were expecting a different game, they'll get upset. And what you have to do is manage their expectations. Let people know what you're getting. And let me tell you how that went on 2 of my games where I think I failed. Because like I said, I think you learn a lot more from failure than from success. So, Temple of Elemental Evil. The team there was trying to recreate one of the most famous modules in AD&D history. The Temple of Elemental Evil, written by Gary Gygax himself. Now, we were changing it from the original Advanced Dungeons & Dragons to D&D 3.0. We were doing our best, but let me tell you what we were up against, and there's videos on this. We had a low budget, a very, very short development time of less than 2 years. In fact, the original time and budget was a year and a half, 18 months. And we had a very small team. We had a dozen people, maybe a couple more. And the couple more were part-time people who were coming on to do something very specific that we just were running out of time to do. So in the middle of all that, we found out that WotC was changing to D&D 3.5. Now, it turns out they knew it, and Atari knew it. We didn't know that. So all of a sudden, we were like, wait, we're going to put out a 3.0 game a few months after 3.5 comes out. So we wanted to switch. They said, okay, switch, but they weren't going to give us any extra time. Finally, I asked them for 3 months and negotiated something, and they got it down to 2 months. As I've mentioned before, in the middle of all this, I got a kidney stone. And that kidney stone didn't pass in the regular day or two, like most people's kidney stones. No, 4 months. 4 months of pain and being on really strong pain medication. That wrecked a lot of what I was trying to do in the game, at least on my stuff, and also my oversight of other people's stuff. And then on top of that, Leonard and Jason were busy on Vampire. So I didn't have their expertise. They're way better storytellers, way better narrative designers, good at doing that that crossover between programming and art, which we call technical art. I didn't have their help for that. So some of this explains what happened with Temple. It's not an excuse. I'm explaining what happened. But guess what? Players don't care about that. They bought the game and they're like, whoa, this game had a really bad story. This game had really bad encounter design. This game is really buggy. That's all they care about. That's all they cared about. There's no real way to manage their expectations out of those things. So that was bad because we tried to do too much with too little time and money, and that was our fault. People had very valid expectations of what they would get, and they didn't get it. Now let's look at what I consider to be the opposite of that, which is the Outer Worlds. We set out to make Fallout in space. And we even said that because we said, hey, this is from the creators of Fallout New Vegas, because that was what Obsidian made. Now, we had a way lower budget than most AAA games, and we said that in every interview we did. It was the first game that Obsidian was ever making with Unreal. We brought that up. It's like, hey, we've spent a lot of time learning how this engine works. We also had to hire a lot of new people to work on the game because the other projects were already well staffed. We had new narrative designers. We had new programmers being hired. But guess what? Again, players don't care about this. All they cared about was what game they got. And in this case, I thought they got a pretty good game. We tried to manage all the expectations that people had. But for some reason, excuse me, players either didn't watch those interviews or didn't care about them, and their expectations were set. They thought they were getting Fallout New Vegas length and mechanics and everything, but in a slightly different setting. Now, the game we shipped was short. It was shorter than people wanted, even though we repeatedly said it's about a 20-hour game. People were like, I wish it was a 40-hour game. But it was also very bug-free, especially by Obsidian standards. It was a very tight, well-made, well-crafted game. And it sold really well, which is something that people still, who didn't like it, rally against, saying people were tricked or whatever. I don't know how people were tricked and continue to be tricked for 5 years, but there we go. But the bottom line is, Outer Worlds wasn't what some people expected. And they will say that. They will go online, they'll go on forums, or talk about, I wanted this, and they told me I'd get this, even though we didn't. And I got this, so I'm not happy. And that will happen with your game. So the problem is, you're going to work really hard to solve discoverability. But then you're left on how to manage expectations. Once people discover your game, which is becoming harder and harder, how do you make sure that they know the game they're getting is the game they want? So the advice I have is be very clear in your messaging, and in all your messaging. Be consistent and be clear. You're releasing a PR statement? Read it. Make sure it's saying exactly what you want and not implying things you're not giving. When you do interviews with game journalists, make sure you say the same things that were said in your PR statement. Don't promise things that you're not going to do. Don't imply things thinking it makes the game sound better that you know you're not going to deliver. And this is true whether you're doing a conference, whether you're, doing some online Q&A on Reddit. Everywhere you should give the same message. Basically, what I recommend to people is state what kind of game you're making, what the genre is, what the setting is, what kind of story you're telling. Talk about specifically about how many hours you expect people to get out of it and whether or not it's replayable. And then, this is really important, if you compare it to another game, say why you're doing the comparison. Maybe they both are open world. Maybe they share similar settings. Maybe the humor style was the same. But be specific. Because if you just say, hey, we're a lot like Half-Life, people might expect an action shooter. People might expect an 80-hour game. People might expect the game to be in source. So there's so many things that come when you make a comparison like that you want to be very, very specific on what your comparison is. Now, I said on the one hand. The other hand is this. People are still going to think what they want. You can say all you want. You can do all you want. You can show clips from the game. It's not going to change some people's minds. They're still going to think what they think about your game and then make a comparison between what you said you were going to give and what you gave to what they thought you were going to do. And if that comparison is lacking, they are going to go online and they're going to complain about it. Are they wrong? Yes. Did they not listen to you or any of the, dozens of interviews you did? Yes, that is true. But they don't care. And a lot of people listening to them don't care. They're just hearing someone go, oh no, this game isn't very good. It's not very long, or it doesn't have depth of perks or something that you thought was really, really important that you had to have. Even though no one said it had that on the team, they expected it. And then when they didn't get it, they got upset. That is exactly the kind of expectations that you want to try to manage. However, all the management in the world isn't necessarily going to work. So you also have to accept, just like with discoverability, that some people who would love your game will never find it. You're going to accept that some people who you think are right in your target audience who learn about your game will think you're delivering something else, even though you didn't say you were delivering that. They're going to think it, and then they're going to be mad that they didn't get it. And this has happened on every game I've ever had, and I think you just have to find a way to manage that. Maybe you'll find a better way than I found to manage it. So my final words on this, when you're getting your game finished towards the end, really work hard on trying to manage the expectations of what game you're delivering to the consumer. Try to talk directly to players in your interviews and go, here's what we're giving you. Here's what we think it's like. Here's how long it'll be. Here's what you should expect. And hopefully, most people will hear you. And there will be some people who can't, and you can never do anything about that. So I hope this helps.